One of the things that I believe always ought to be said at the end of a camp is that it would be utterly impossible for anybody who is in the least bit sane to accept everything which has been said here. Any more than it would be possible for anybody to go from coast to coast and to visit every kind of a church that there is and say, I accept it all. Well, you just can't. You're kidding yourself. This word God or Jesus Jesus with all of the connotations and all of the practices which you see encompassed in those words, rites and rituals or the lack of them, all of them, I presume, good for the individuals that are in that particular area, but God as you say it when you're 5 years old, 10, 15, 20, 30, 40, 80, it's the same word, but the content of the word is just the same as darkness and light. But I think that one of the things that the camp, or the basic thing the camps are founded on, is that you will be listening or you will be meeting people who have had experiences, who have found something which has become a center to their lives. Not just mere theory that they have found it. And from the beginning of the camps, you have had people that theologically could never have been fitted into the same mold. If you put them all into the same theological cage, it would be the biggest fight that you can imagine. But there's something for theology is primarily mental. I mean, it's thinking through. It's my mind. It's the logic and the rationale which makes sense to me. And yet we all know that there is something way beyond anything that we can really spell out logically and rationally. There's something that we, for want of a better term, we call spirit. And so you could, so you could take Rufus Mosley, who was, I don't know what. I suppose he was some kind of a combination of a Southern Baptist and a Pentecostal. And you could take John Gaynor Banks, who was, I would imagine you would call him, akin to being a high church Episcopalian. And you could take Starr Daily, and I'm not sure what he belongs to. But all of them were one in the reality of a spirit which overcame the divisions of the mind. So I think that what you're here for is that you have kind of, in a sense, been in a supermarket of mental theology, maybe, but you also, at the same time, you have experienced not only with the speakers here, but with the people that you meet in the hallways and everything, different ideas of people that have found different things, and some way or other, as you go back, you will naturally, without there being an awful lot of struggle in it, will be accepting the things and the ideas that are meant for you right now. It isn't necessarily that you reject the others, but you put them up on the shelf, and maybe the time will come when something that you've seen, something that you've heard, will be just exactly the thing for you. The same thing happens with books. I have had books on my shelf for years and years and years and years, which I had bought on some impulse, and they lie there, and I will think to myself as the days, as the months go by, what impulse was it? What in the world was it that made me buy that book? And it may sit there even for years, and then one day, without there being any strain, stress, just a spontaneous action, you'll simply pick it out of the shelf and start to read it, and it's just the right thing. So I think that maybe the Spirit, God being able to look far into the future, not being able to explain things to you which are going to happen then, puts an instinct, puts an impulse, puts a hunch into you. Because there's no possible way to explain to you mentally why you are doing the action there. And C.T. Studd has said that when God wants to speak to you, he first of all puts a desire into your heart. And this has happened so often. I'm sure that whether you call it instinct, hunch, feeling, urge, intuition, whatever it is, it's higher wisdom, which at the moment cannot be fitted into your mental rationale. And I know that when he comes in to live in you, that you have to begin to trust the things that you once distrusted, your feelings, your urges, and your instincts, because he is going to be the master organist, playing on all the possibilities within you and punching one key now and the other there. And so you begin to trust these things, your thoughts, your attractions, and everything else, simply because you're trusting him. And this will many times bring you into opposition with what your mind says. But I have found out that having worshiped my mind in study for so long, I have found out little by little. It hasn't happened all of a sudden, for I've been very hard to lead in many, many ways. But I found out this, that when my mind decides one thing, even if I have a sheet of facts or data right in front of me, and there's a reluctance, a reluctant feeling, for want of a better word, I don't know what it is, but when I drive my mind and say, well, this feeling's crazy, when I go against the feeling, it always turns out wrong. I've never known it to fail yet. Now, this doesn't mean that you have those feelings all the time. You're supposed to use your mind. You're supposed to use all of the experience that you have. But I think if we're trusting God, and there are some kind of facts, and who in the world has all of the facts? Nobody does. But if in trusting him, if our mind is not adequate, then the wisdom of the Spirit will play upon our emotions, our instincts, our intuitions, whatever they are, and you better obey them if you're trusting him. All of our dreams far out, all of our visions of the reality which we are far outstrip what we can incarnate. And as Browning said, that a man's reach shall exceed his grasp. It ought to. The things that you know, the things that you sense, the impatience that you feel on the inside to be what you can apprehend with the mind, and yet you can't incarnate in the body and in your actions. That's good. It has always led us on. And this is why that we should read and have confessions of faith and all the things that are beyond us to keep reaching us on and on and on and on. And I don't think that this rest, which it talks about in the Bible, is a rest of the static, but it's a rest in movement. It's a rest of going onward. It's a rest of discovery. It's a rest of trust in the midst of turmoil. It's a rest of trust in the midst of reaching out for more and more and more. And we have an awfully good story of that in the Gospel of John here about the incident of the raising of Lazarus. And here he is, and it has been said that you will not find any story in the Gospels there where Jesus got all excited and was rushing and hurrying from place to place. Here he hears that his friend Lazarus is sick, and instead of doing the things that we do, getting all excited and anxious and upset, he remains in the place where he is. It says, and he abode still in the same place where he was. And I'm sure that there are words and there are meanings which I don't think are sheer accident either in the translations that we have. This word still, stillness, still. Martha was always anxious and troubled about many things, but Mary sat still at his feet. He said, "Peace, be still." In stillness. So often if we would just force ourselves not to go running off in all directions at the same time to save the world or whatever else it is, in going more slowly, we would get there faster and save a lot of heartache in the process of the journey. So he abode still. I think this thing of guidance as to what you should do, sometimes we know a way too much. Sometimes we rush in where angels fear to tread into an individual's innermost life, into the intimacy of their life. Sometimes we in our enthusiasm expose them to things which may be utterly and completely theological truths, but which they are not ready for yet. I think this was one of the loving, kind secrets of Rufus Mosley, and one of the most loving and kind things that I ever saw him do was at the Arkansas Camp Farthest Out many years back. At that camp, there was a Jewish girl, and she had been reared in this home where the name of Jesus was almost a dirty word. It was a word to use to scare children, literally. If they were naughty, if they were bad, they were told in a very cutting, ominous way that Jesus would get them. And according to her, they were every so often, if they were real naughty, they would be put in a closet, maybe, and also told that Jesus would get you there. So this name Jesus, by the time she got up to into an adult life, was one of them had all of the colorations of emotional fear and insecurity and terror. And yet in Little Rock, Arkansas, she had a job in the YMCA. How she got to know anything about the CFO, I don't have any idea. But she showed up at this camp, and of course Rufus was there, and he was just talking Jesus, 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 Jesus. And even though she was an adult and was trying to keep her mind open, all of the past was kind of sweeping in on her. And the time came when, simply because of Rufus's big, loving spirit, I've never known him to criticize or condemn anybody, no matter what they were. And how could he? For in Rufus' journey to what he found was reality for him. He had come through about everything under the sun, from sheer agnosticism of the sharpest intellectual kind to Christian Science to, I don't know, everything. Just name it, he was in it and out of it too. And so with this tremendous background which he had, he was able to meet no matter who it was, with a great feeling and with a great acceptance and compassion. And she came to him nervous and hurt and just blurted out the whole thing and asked Rufus what she should do. And Rufus, as he oftentimes did, just stared off into space and squinted his eyes and got real still. And this is one of the things, even though he used to jump around and do everything else, Rufus could be still, and oftentimes was. And he would sort of drift off and he'd say, yes, Lord, yes, Lord, yes, Lord. And he turned to her in the most loving way, and he said, now, he says, honey, you go and you continue to pray to Jehovah and ask him to show you the highest. And I thought this was one of the finest, most loving, wise, kind things you could have done. Not that you would have said that to everybody. And this is why. The Spirit is a living, creative spirit within you. It isn't mechanical law so that you're going to treat everybody in just exactly the same way. You can't expect that. And the time came because of the way that this kind old man, filled with the spirit of loving compassion, talked to her, that she did go on and she did pray and continued to pray to her Jehovah. And the time came when Jesus became one of the most wonderful words and realities in her life. But supposing he had said, well, you've got to do this, that way, he would have driven her away. Jesus himself did just exactly the same thing. When the rich young ruler came to him and asked him what he should do, he said, give all that you have to the poor, and you shall have eternal life. And the young ruler was sad. But do you know what it says? And Jesus looked upon him and loved him. Love is not dependent upon accepting or doing or living up to the standards where you are now. It is not dependent upon making everybody else into your same image, emotionally, mentally, theologically, artistically, or any other way. Love recognizes where a person is. And Frank Olmsted, years and years ago, said something which I have always liked, that we should treat people as we treat apples. He says if you go to a tree at a certain time of year and you bite into an apple and it's bitter and sour and you shiver from head to foot, don't cuss it, just wait. Just wait. The time will come, if you give it the patience which love is, it will be sweet. I think the same thing happens with people. The rich young ruler didn't reject Jesus because in a premeditated sense he hated him. He wasn't capable of it. And why condemn anybody? Because at whatever the stage of their mental or emotional or temperamental level is, that they are incapable. Just wait. And continue to feed them, and continue to feed them. And you can only do this if you're still. Because in the sensitivity of stillness, you'll know just how far to go. And in the sensitivity of stillness, you will know when to hug and pet and kiss, and you'll know when to be a surgeon also. All of these things come. That's why you should oftentimes pray for guidance as to how to pray, instead of playing God all the time. You make a very poor choice of it. So for whatever the reason, I think this word still, that he abode still in the same place where he was. And I think Jesus had this inner rest. He had in his mind made up constantly about everybody. I think this is a moment-by-moment living. And I think if you are really walking in the Spirit or abiding in the Spirit, that whatever the situation is that you are going to face momentarily, day by day, at the moment it will be given you. And remember that he said that the time would come when the disciples would be hauled up before princes and kings and judges. He said, don't be afraid. Think not beforehand what you shall say at that time. At that moment it will be given you. There isn't much sense of giving it to you before you even know what the situation is. This is just pure common sense also. Years ago, when I began traveling, I used to, if I was going on a trip to California, and I had to speak in this city and the next city and the next city, and about the only thing that I would have would be names as to who was going to meet me there. Well, these names meant meant absolutely nothing to me. I didn't know who they were. And so I would sit down and fret and stew and do everything else as to what I would do in this city and the next city and the next city. Well, it was utterly foolish, for I didn't even know what the schedule would be. And many times I would have myself all worked up to a certain schedule and sequence of thoughts and meetings and everything else, and I would get there and it wouldn't be anything like that at all. And I had to learn then that in some or other that it was in living close and in stillness and in rest daily that whatever the situation was, to go there like a little baby and put yourself into whoever's hands it happened to be and trust. And at that moment, when you get into whatever the situation is, somehow or other, there's a creative aliveness that comes alive within you, and you meet the situation in rest. And furthermore, you meet it much more adequately because nobody knows what the needs in any audience is. But if I've got a speech all made up a month or a week or a year beforehand that I'm going to give in San Diego, come hell or high water, that's what I'm going to talk about on the afternoon of whatever it is. Well, I suppose in some kind of an intellectual fashion, it'll be okay, but it's not going to feed the people that are out there. And many, many times you get up, and right in the middle of a talk, you will there'll be something that's holding you back, and other ideas will keep pushing into your mind time after time after time, and in a sense it's an embarrassing thing, for you want to be an intellectual giant and have everything go A, B, C, D, and this thing keeps pushing in on you, and you try to push it back out of your mind. I remember years ago down in St. Louis, I was up there, and I was right in the middle of a talk, and it was a big audience, and the things that were coming into my mind just didn't have anything to do with what I had said as the subject, and what I had started on, and what I was halfway through with even. And you would feel like a scatterbrain if you were just going to stop that and go on with something entirely differently. But I've learned that if this urging, if this something on the inside keeps coming up and punching at you, goading you, why, you better give in to it. And so, in an embarrassed way, feeling that I was a fool, I just gave in to it, and I just plain stopped, and I went on, and I began to tell my own story, which was about whiskey and and all that. Didn't have a thing to do with what I said, and I thought, boy, these people will think that I'm crazy. But I just had to. And I got through, and I still didn't know why I had done it, and I was ashamed to meet people afterwards. But later on, about a year or two afterwards, I met a man, and people had driven him about 200 miles from central Missouri out there, and they had parked in the parking lot just when my talk was about halfway through. He had been on whiskey, and he was an alcoholic for many years, and these people had just picked him up practically bodily, and they'd driven him all this way. And he came in right in the middle of the talk, and he was resentful. He was resentful about God and religion and Jesus and people and respectability and everything else. And he says, all of a sudden you were up there and you began to hem and haw and stutter, and he said, I thought to myself, oh, hell. Why did I ride in this car all this way for this guy up there? And then he said, you began to talk about drinking and whiskey, and he said, I was all ears. Well, the end result of that is that over the years, this man eventually became the chairman of a camp farthest out, and is in the ministry now. So how can you tell? And I mean, this gets to be an act of faith. You don't know. It would be so nice if God would say, now look, you've got to stop here. There is a man entering the parking lot now, and you have to go on with it. But he doesn't do anything of that sort. He just says, if you really believe that I'm living in you, and if you're really abiding in me, if I am the one who is responsible for your feelings and your emotions and thoughts, trust me. Step out in faith. Trust me. And I think you only get this trust from being still. And so Jesus went, and he abode there. And finally he shows up. And this is in the home. And wouldn't it be much harder? I mean, if Lazarus had been a stranger, it would have been, you could have said, well, it's okay. But what about when it is one of your best friends in one of the homes where you have been a guest so often, where you're greatly loved and where they greatly love you? Haven't you got a responsibility to get there just as quick as you can? Not unless the Spirit says so. And so the time came that when that while all of the neighbors were in there comforting Mary and Martha, that it comes known that he is in the neighborhood 15 furlongs away. And then Martha, as soon as she heard that Jesus was coming, went and met him. But Mary sat still in the house. Here's that word still so often. Sure, you can put all kinds of interpretations onto that word still, but I think there are deeper meanings always. This matches up with Mary's personality, and it certainly matches up with Martha's, who the minute she hears anything, boy, she's up and going. And when she met him, she said, Lord, if you had been here, my brother had not died. Accusation, hurt, wondering. Maybe God had let her down. What had happened? Why had he gone away? But I know that even now, whatever you wilt ask of God, God will give it to thee. Now, that's a pretty big statement. But I know that even now that he will give it to you. And I know that even now, whatever you will ask God, God will give it. Jesus saith, thy brother shall rise again. Martha said unto him, I know that he shall rise again in the resurrection at the last day. Jesus said, I am the resurrection and the life. He that believeth in me, though he were dead, yet shall he live. And whosoever liveth and believeth in me shall never die. Believest thou this? She saith unto him, Yea, Lord, I believe that thou art the Christ, the Son of God, which should come into the world. Now that's just about as big a statement of faith as you will ever meet. And this is the kind of thing that we say in some way when we join the church. That he is the Lord, that he's a master, that he's the resurrection and the life, that he's the way and the truth and the life, everything that is encompassed in those words. And so you go on, and she goes back and she tells Mary. And Mary comes or she says, the master is come and calleth for thee. And as soon as she heard it, she arose quickly and came to him. When Mary was come where Jesus was and saw him, she fell down at his feet, saying, Lord, if you had been here, my brother had not died. Just exactly the same words that Martha had said. How many hours had they spent together in that house since the death of their brother, saying, oh, why wasn't he here? If he had been here, this wouldn't have happened. So they got it all decided, and they're sure in their minds. When Jesus therefore saw her weeping, and the Jews also weeping, which came with her, he groaned in spirit and was troubled, and said, Where have you laid him? They said unto him, Come and see. Jesus wept. Then said the Jews, behold how he loved them. And some of them said, could not this man which opened the eyes of the blind have caused that even this man should not have died? Jesus therefore, again groaning in himself, came to the grave. It was a cave, and a stone lay upon it. And Jesus said, take ye away the stone. Martha, the sister of him that was dead, saith unto him, Lord, by this time he stinketh, for he hath been dead 4 days. Jesus said unto her, said I not unto thee that if thou wouldst believe, thou shouldst see the glory of God? Well, there's an awful lot in these words. And this is the accusation, or these are the thoughts, even if a physical finger isn't pointed, a mental finger is, that so many people in this line, and they say, well, if he's such a servant of God, why did so and so die? Why was so and so horribly crippled in some accident? Why did this happen? Why is he in such financial difficulty now? I mean, if he has been able to help others, why in the world hasn't he been able to help himself or his family or his friends? And this always comes. And Martha is just like all of us. Here we come up to, we use such big words. Our vision, our desires, the demand of our nature so far exceeds what we've been experiencing, that we get up to certain things and we say, yes, he is Lord, he is God, he is this, he is everything else. But when you get right up to the grave, to the thing, whether it's the grave of your dreams, the hopes and the yearnings that you had when you were younger, or whatever it is, the faith that you once had, the enthusiasm for life, the expectancies that you've allowed to die because life has beaten it out of you, and yet we still go on mouthing that Jesus is the resurrection and the life, and he that believeth in him, he shall overcome all things, blah, 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 and yet we're beaten and defeated. And we've buried most of ourselves in a tomb. And we've turned our back upon hopes and dreams and aspirations and the possibilities of achievements we just buried. And yet we say we are radiant, overcoming Christians, and the world will not overcome us, but it sure has. And this is the situation that she's in. She says, Lord, but he's dead. What's the sense of rolling the stone away? And he said, well, all right, maybe he is dead. But there's one thing that you can do, and that is that you can roll the stone away. There comes a time, 8 times, many times, hundreds of times, thousands of times in everybody's life, when you've gone as far as your faith will take you. No matter how good your faith is, or no matter how many hours or how many years you have spent praying, there's a place where your faith, where your hopes, where your expectancies end. You see no possibility of a way out. And we oftentimes think that this is the end. That there's, we have wonderful ideas, but we can't do anything about it, and we can't either. And this is the whole point of this story. Roll away the stone. If thou wouldst believe, thou shouldst see the glory of God. Then they took away the stone from the place where the dead was laid. And Jesus lifted up his eyes and said, Father, I thank thee that thou hast heard me. And I knew that thou hearest me always. But because of the people which stand by, I said it, that they may believe that thou hast sent me. You know, there are very few times, actually, there are very few prayers, I mean spoken prayers, which we know, which Jesus uttered. And here isn't one. I mean, this he is saying for some sort of an unspoken prayer or expectancy or knowing or belief, which was an interior silent thing. Prayer is a soul's sincere desire, uttered or unexpressed. It's the whole bent of your life. It's the compass point of your soul and your expectancies. It isn't words. And oftentimes, many of the words we use are just whistling in the dark to work up our courage. And there are times when Jesus lifted his eyes to heaven and it says, and he sighed. He went up into the mountain all night long to pray. Well, it's for sure that he just wasn't talking. Stillness and inner rest is one of the greatest, is the real prayer that we are. Our prayer isn't our words, it's what we are. And what we are isn't necessarily what we have achieved either. I mean, it isn't necessarily the incarnation of what we are. What we are is also the dreams and the yearnings and the hopes which are far beyond the achievements which we have accomplished up to this minute. All of that's rolled into what we are. So he said, I thank you that you have always heard me. Before they call, I will answer. And while they are yet speaking, I will say, here I am. And when he had thus spoken, he cried with a loud voice, Lazarus, come forth. And he that was dead came forth, bound hand and foot with grave clothes, and his face was bound about with a napkin. Jesus saith unto them, Loose him and let him go. And when an individual gets called, he isn't called at the same kind of a person that he was before. He gets loosened to set the prisoner free. He's a different personality than he was before. And many of the Jews which came to Mary and had seen the things which Jesus did believed on him. But some of them went their ways to the Pharisees and told them what Jesus had done. I think here is the thing. Where my faith ends, Jesus' faith or God's faith just begins. If we were utterly dependent upon our own faith. Now we are supposed to develop our own faith as we develop our muscle by using it. And George Mueller years and years ago said that when people would come up to him because of all the things that he had done, missionaries sent all over the world and a publishing company set up for literature and a Bible school and an orphanage and everything else, and they say that by the time he died, I don't know how many millions or maybe even it was hundreds of millions of dollars that had gone through his hands. And they say, oh, he's a man of great faith. And they would come up and look at him with wondering eyes and just tell him that they wish they had his kind of faith. And he says, you have got my kind of faith. God doesn't give a stint on things like this. And you know, the whole thing about it is that even if you could weigh the amount of faith that you have in a test tube, it really doesn't make any difference in this kind of life. Because whether according to natural talent you only had a little bit, or whether according to human standards you had a lot, I don't care what it is, you're going to come to the end of it. It just isn't enough all by yourself, no matter how much you have. You're going to come to the end of it. And you're going to come to the grave. It may be the grave of your dreams. It may be the grave of your physical health, or your hopes for your children, or the kind of a job that you're going to have, or what you're going to do with your life. You're going to come to the end of it. I don't care who you are, or how much natural talent in this area you have. And then he'll say, well, roll away the stone and let me do it now. And this is what we said the other night, what Rufus Mosley said, if you're poor and you marry a rich man, your poorness is swallowed up in his riches. If you're a weak person and you come into league with somebody that is strong, if you are both pushing the same cart, and you both put your shoulder to push, your weakness is swallowed up in his strength. That's about all there's into it. And some of the great, I'd say the greatest miracles which will happen in your life, and this will be the overcoming life, whatever it is, and no matter what words you happen to call it by, will always come when you've reached the end of your rope. and Mueller and Hudson Taylor and many others in their orphanages in China or wherever else it is, used to come to the last bag of rice or the last loaf of bread or potato or whatever it was, and then they would get down on their knees and start to get into a state of praise and thanksgiving, and they say, well, now that we've come to the end of ourselves, God has to act. And he always did. But maybe we're all built in the same way, that while we have even a little penny to depend on, we would rather depend upon that tangible nothingness than we would upon the riches, whether it's the riches of creativity or thought or wisdom or joy or peace or accomplishment in any line of endeavor that you happen to be in. We never really make discoveries that we are more than we are until we come to the end of ourselves. And in the book by Marguerite Harmon Bro, which I don't know whether it's on the book table or not, but it is called More Than We Are. And in there, the reason that she chose that title, More Than We Are, for this book was that in the diaries of some Spanish explorers who came over to this country and they landed on the coast of Florida. They were seeking for gold, and the ships were wrecked. They went inland and they were captured by the Indians there, and the Indians had never seen a white man before. And so they assumed that these were some kind of gods. And yet all that they were Spanish soldiers out for conquest, out for gold. Nothing religious about them. Just out to slaughter and do everything else they can. Gold, gold, gold. But they were captured by the Indians and they were treated like gods. And the day came that in the village in which they were held, an epidemic broke out. People were sick all over the place, and some of them were dying. Well, the Indians naturally thought to themselves, well, if these peoples are gods, why, they can heal us. And the time came when they went to these captured soldiers and told them that the next day they were going to heal their people. And if they didn't, they would be killed. And the soldiers were filled with panic, and they didn't know what to do. And somebody had a crucifix in his, I don't know, either in his bag or his pocket. And they had been to church very, very seldom. But they had back in Spain, they had seen the priest hold up the crucifix over people and make the sign of the cross over them. And what it meant, they didn't have any idea. But it was supposed to represent God, or it was supposed to be a blessing of some sort. And so the next day, they had all of the sick laid out on this roadway or pathway or street. And the soldiers it was either heal or else. This was just all that there was to it. And so in desperation, panic, fear, terror, everything you can think of, they threw themselves up. They knew they couldn't heal anybody. I mean, there was no doubt in their mind. If anything was going to happen, God was going to have to do it. And so they went up there, and besides, each person knelt on their knees and put the crucifix on them and made the sign of the cross on, knowing that, God, you just have to do this. We can't do it. And they discovered that people were healed. In fact, I think the story is that all of them were. Somehow or other, when we come to the end of ourselves, that's when we discover more than we are. And I think that no matter what the situation is, and why wait till you come to the end of yourself when you know that eventually you're going to? And I think that this is why, instead of saying what a power and prayer I am, or what great peace I have, say, Father, use me as a channel for you to do your work. Lord Jesus, you do it. I offer my body, as he says, offer your body as a living sacrifice. A living sacrifice. Sacrifice it to me, to divine love, to the infinity of the Father through my body. I am the doorway. Offer your body as a living sacrifice for me to do the work that I want to do. And if you do this and you walk in the Spirit and quit playing God by yourself, and sometimes it will mean, and you'll find that there will be times when at that moment it will be given you, it may be a healing, a physical healing, a mental healing. It may be a word of comfort. It may be something that will change the direction of a person's life. Only God in His infinite wisdom knows where that person really is. And sometimes it will seem to you it will be nothing, and you'll merely stand beside them dumb, but you'll be there. And you find out at a later date that that was just exactly what you were supposed to do. This is what I call being led of the Spirit and walking in the Spirit. Present your body a living sacrifice. Because time after time you're going to come to up to the tomb where all you can do is roll away the stone and let Him pronounce the words Lazarus, John, Mary, Pat, Mike, whatever it is, come forth. And they will. Lord Jesus, we thank You for this night. Teach us the secret and the obedience of stillness. Help us to realize that the great things and confessions that we make are not ours without You. Help us to be childlike enough to roll away the stone, whatever it is, and to know that You will call forth and set loose and set free whatever or whoever the situation demands at that moment. Now, I think it would be a nice thing while we are still with our heads bowed and our eyes closed. Won't you either reach out beside you or reach and touch the person that is in front of you right now? And just by this simple act, without knowing why, you are rolling away the stone to let the Lord God Almighty bless, heal, set free, release. Now ask Him to do that in your own life.